Imagine building a river where none should exist. Not a small stream, but a massive artery of water flowing 130 kilometers through one of the harshest deserts on Earth. This is the story of how a nation surrounded by enemies, sitting on mostly desert land, pulled off one of the greatest engineering feats of the 20th century. A project so ambitious that experts said it was impossible. So controversial it nearly sparked a war. And so successful it literally turned sand into gardens. This is the story of Israel's national water carrier, the artificial river that changed everything. To understand why this river was necessary, you need to understand Israel's water problem. And it was a nightmare. By the 1950s, Israel faced a mathematical impossibility. The country had about 2 million people. Within decades, projections showed 6 million or more. But here's the problem. 60% of Israel's population lived in the central and southern regions, areas that received almost no rain. Meanwhile, the Sea of Galilee in the north held 30% of the country's fresh water, but barely anyone lived there. The north was drowning in water it didn't need. The south was dying of thirst. Early settlers in the Negev desert faced brutal conditions. Wells ran dry. Crops failed. Every drop of water had to be carefully rationed. Without a solution, the dream of settling the entire country was just that, a dream, but Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, had a vision. He famously said, "It is in the Negev that the creativity and pioneer vigor of Israel will be tested." Enter Simcha Blas, a Polish-born engineer who would design something that had never been attempted at this scale before. The plan was staggering in its ambition. Blas proposed building a massive water conveyance system that would take water from the Sea of Galilee in the north and transport it 130 kilometers south to the Negev desert. But this wasn't just a pipe. The water would need to be pumped uphill. 200 meters. Flow through massive underground tunnels. Cross through 3 different climate zones. Deliver 1.7 million cubic meters of water every single day. To put that in perspective, that's enough to fill 680 Olympic swimming pools. Every single day. The cost? $420 million in 1960s money, equivalent to over $4 billion today. For a young nation still recovering from war, this was an astronomical sum. Critics called it madness. "We're a poor country," they argued. "We need schools, hospitals, roads. And you want to build a river?" But Levi Eshkol, who became prime minister in 1963, pushed forward. The choice was simple: build this, or watch the nation's future dry up. In 1959, construction began. And it was immediately clear this would be unlike any engineering project Israel had attempted. There was another problem. One that made the engineering challenges look simple. The surrounding Arab nations were furious. In 1964, the Arab League held emergency summits. They saw Israel's water project as an existential threat. Why? Because the Jordan River, which fed the Sea of Galilee, flowed through multiple countries. Syria threatened military action. Egypt's Nasser called it water theft. Plans were drawn up to divert the river's sources in Syria and Lebanon before the water even reached Israel. Skirmishes broke out. Israeli tractors were fired upon. Fighter jets scrambled. This water project was pushing the region toward war. But Israel didn't stop building. The scale of construction was staggering. At its peak, over 200,000 workers were involved. For context, that was 10% of Israel's entire population at the time. The national water carrier consisted of a pumping station at the Sea of Galilee that could lift 72 cubic meters of water per minute. A 9-kilometer tunnel blasted through solid rock. 86 kilometers of open canals and pipes. A massive storage reservoir called the Beit Netofa Valley. The tunnel sections were perhaps the most challenging. Workers used controlled explosions to carve through mountains. The rock was so hard that drill bits needed constant replacement. Progress was measured in meters per day. The pipes were equally impressive. Some sections were 2.8 meters in diameter. Large enough to drive a car through, but the real genius wasn't just in the size. It was in the design. Simca Blast designed the system to use gravity wherever possible. After water was pumped uphill initially, much of the southern flow relied on careful elevation planning. This saved enormous amounts of energy. The system also included filtration and treatment facilities. The water couldn't just be taken from the lake and pumped south. It needed to be cleaned, treated, and monitored constantly. In 1964, sections began coming online for testing. Engineers watched nervously as water flowed through the system for the first time. And then, on a day in June 1964, water from the Sea of Galilee reached the northern Negev. For the settlers who had struggled for years, watching fresh water flow into their communities was overwhelming. Some cried. Others danced. This was more than infrastructure, it was hope made liquid. The official inauguration came in 1964, with Prime Minister Levi Eshkol turning the ceremonial valve. "We are not making the desert bloom with words," he declared, "but with water, with sweat, with determination." The national water carrier was operational. The impossible had become reality. But the real story was just beginning. The transformation was almost immediate and stunning. Within 5 years, over 150,000 acres of desert had been converted to agricultural land. Farms that could barely grow potatoes were now producing citrus, avocados, and vegetables. By 1970, agricultural output had increased by 400%. Israel went from importing food to becoming an exporter. The population of the Negev increased by 250%. Cities like Beersheba, which had been struggling desert outposts, exploded in size. New communities sprang up across the south. Ben-Gurion's vision of settling the Negev was becoming reality. The water carrier also sparked innovation. Because water was still precious even with the carrier, Israeli engineers developed drip irrigation, a technology that would revolutionize farming worldwide. Ironically, Simca Blas, the architect of the water carrier, also invented modern drip irrigation. He understood that moving water south was only half the solution. Using it efficiently was the other half. Today, Israel produces more food per drop of water than almost any nation on earth. Farms are controlled by computers. Sensors measure soil moisture in real time. Water is recycled and reused. The economic impact was profound. Studies estimate that every dollar invested in the national water carrier generated $7 in economic returns. Industries flourished. Tourism grew. The entire southern economy transformed. The population shift was exactly what planners hoped for. The Negev went from being nearly empty to housing over 600,000 people, but the water carrier's success created new problems. By the 1990s, Israel faced a crisis. The national water carrier was too successful. Demand had outstripped the Sea of Galilee's capacity. Water levels dropped to dangerous lows. Environmentalists warned of ecological collapse. The lake that saved Israel was now dying because of that success. The country invested heavily in desalination, removing salt from seawater. By 2025, over 80% of Israel's drinking water comes from desalinated seawater. Here's where it gets amazing. Today, the national water carrier sometimes runs in reverse. Instead of taking water from the Sea of Galilee, desalinated water is pumped north to replenish the lake. Israel also recycles over 90% of its wastewater, the highest rate in the world. That treated water irrigates farms across the south. Israel also recycles over 90% of its wastewater, the highest rate in the world. That treated water irrigates farms across the south. From a central control room, engineers can manage water flow across the entire country in real time, responding to demand, weather, and emergencies. Today, if you follow the route of the national water carrier, you'll see its legacy everywhere: fields of crops where there was once only sand. Cities bustling with life where there were once only dreams. A nation of over 9 million people thriving in a land that seemed too harsh to sustain them. The national water carrier didn't just move water. It moved possibility.